All right, so let's just talk about stakeholders a little bit more, because it just gets mentioned a lot. And it's something that we really need to get across, because people sort of give you a vague look or half a definition of stakeholders. So a stakeholder, anyone who can be affected or can affect my business, or said another way, a stakeholder is any person, business, organization that has any form of interest in the project. Okay, so any form of interest. And they might be, your major ones would obviously be your project manager. Okay, obvious stakeholder. The sponsor, the person paying for it, obvious stakeholder. Your team, okay, all the people involved in carrying it out, absolutely. Your customers, your suppliers. At the very minimum, that's going to be your absolute, your big ticket list. Okay, so when we think about that, but it also can be people in the local community. Your local businesses, to some degree your competitors even can be stakeholders, all right? Because what you're doing can affect them. Okay, so they're going to react. They're not just going to sit there and watch your business do something. They're likely to react and have some sort of engagement or some sort of involvement with you very, very quickly. Okay, it's going to be disruptive. All right, so just making sure that we've thought about stakeholders and where they fit into that. All right, so when you're doing your project plan, you really need to think about who these people are. What's this person's interests? Well, what does the sponsor want out of this, and what are the details around them? What is your team expecting out of this project? All right, what are their interests going to be? The opportunity to grow, opportunity for recognition, opportunity for reward. What concerns might they have? This is why we really need to think through who all these different people are and what their different needs are, needs for information, etc., and how they're going to be involved. Okay, so a fair bit of thought needs to get involved in that. All right. The other thing is we need to, particularly for these people, we need to also make sure that we're pretty accurate in our estimates. So when we're going through and asking for resources, or going through asking for objects and whatever it is we're looking for, team, the time or whatever it happens to be, we need to make sure we're being fairly accurate when we make our estimations, because it's going to be part of the vital part of our project management. Okay, if we're starting to ask for certain amount of supplies, we need to make sure our suppliers know, and we need to let them know how much they need to supply to us by when. Okay, if our estimates are way off, if we ask for 1,000 hamburger buns and we're actually going to go out and make 2,000 hamburgers, we're going to have a problem. We're not going to be able to achieve our goals. Okay, so that's going to place us at risk. So being accurate at our estimates, make sure our suppliers can supply the right things at the right time to us. Making sure they're accurate in our estimates, make sure that the sponsor's pretty happy that we spent the right budget at the right time. Making sure that we're accurate in our estimates, make sure that us as project managers can carry out the tasks that we said we're going to. Okay, the team and customers, they also have other things they want, but we need to make sure that we're fairly accurate where possible to control the risk. Okay, so make sure we're accurate in those estimates, and what we try and do is you try and avoid inaccuracies. Now, what's going to actually create those inaccuracies? Okay, what's going to create inaccuracies is, once again, going back to our scope. If our scope was loose, that's going to create inaccuracies. If we didn't get definitions there, that's going to create a problem for us. If we haven't identified the activities that our team members or customers might be involved in, that will also start to create inaccurate estimates. If we don't know how many customers we're expecting, if we signed up and said, we're expecting 1,000 people, but only 500 turned up, we've got a problem there. Okay, because our estimates are wrong. Or if we say we're going to deal with 1,000 customers and 2,000 turn up, we've got a problem once again because we now can't supply to them. All right, so making sure that we're accurate here is going to make sure those stakeholders stay happy with us. Okay, another problem that creates inaccuracies is people being too eager to please. They sign up to things they can't possibly deliver. Okay, it's that old thing of they just say too many yeses rather than say, well, hang on, let's be a little bit realistic, and rather than go off and just try and keep the boss happy. Okay, that creates inaccuracies, and what happens is once you do that, you're going to find these stakeholders get really angry at you because you got something really badly wrong. Okay, so don't always say yes. Make sure that you're signing up to what you can deliver, not making promises you can't deliver, because it just has a whole bunch of different effects for all these different stakeholders who will probably stop loving you very quickly. The other thing that can create inaccuracies there is just inexperience. All right, if you've never done this before, you know, you've never done it before. You don't have any experience to base it on. So if you're going to go into something which, you know, we haven't done before, we don't really need, you know, that we don't really know, make sure your sponsor's aware of that. Make sure your team are aware and say, hey, look, we haven't done this before. This is a new activity. In order to make sure that, you know, we can risk manage, we have to be aware there's going to be some inaccuracies in our judgment. We're just going to have some holes. We've tried to relate it back to something we've done in the past, but this is totally new. So new stuff's going to come out. We need to be aware. We need to be flexible. All right, so the more you know about your estimates, about whether they're accurate or inaccurate, the more information you give these stakeholders and the more you're going to keep them on board. The other thing that can come up is false assumptions. If you've just assumed that something's going to happen, you know, we assumed that an event was going to take place, or, you know, I saw an event that came up a couple of weeks ago. It was assumed everything was going ahead, but then it poured rain. Okay, so that event didn't happen. And when that event didn't happen, obviously people who were going to be at that event, they need to go back to their suppliers. They've got their customers who need to be informed. Okay, there's a whole lot of things that happen. Okay, we assume that our event's going to happen because we're going to have perfect weather in, say, summer, but, you know, what if all of a sudden it starts pouring rain? Okay, pressure from sponsors, that can create a problem too and start to lead us down some inaccuracies that the sponsors want a certain thing a certain way. Pressure from other stakeholders. You know, the team really want an opportunity to do something and we try and factor it in where it really wasn't the point of the project scope. Okay, so these stakeholders can drive you a little bit as well. Be careful of that. Make sure that everything that goes into your project is well considered because, as I say, these stakeholders, they're going to have a mind of their own and they are going to start asking questions. And the other thing about the team is if the team doesn't have a load of experience, sometimes they're going to get things wrong. And if you just assume they're always going to get it right, when they get it wrong, you won't have allowed time for corrective action. Okay, so you really got to look at who these stakeholders are and what it's going to do to the decisions that you make. Okay, at this stage, look, you know, there's going to be a lot of guesswork. That's just the truth of, you know, projects. It's part of the fun, part of the challenge, that there is a degree of guessing. But what happens is over time and experience, you'll find that your guesses get more and more accurate and more detailed. All right, there are a couple of different estimating tools you can use. It can break the project down into phases. So you say, well, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. So at that point, we will need. At this point, we will need. At this point, we will need. At this point, we will need. And what we do is we create some artificial horizons. Okay? Once we do that, then we can add all the different parts together. So I can say, right, week 1, we are doing this, and we require that. Week 2, week 3, or it might not be week, it might be part 1, we're doing this bit. Part 2, we then do this. Part 3, we do that. Think of it like a holiday. Part 1, getting to the airport and getting on the plane. Okay, part 1 finishes when we arrive at the country of destination. Part 2, the holiday. And in this phase, we will go through, have a holiday, have the hotel, have this, have a bunch of meals. Part 3, getting home. At that point, we go to the airport, from wherever we were staying, the flight home, and then to our house. So here we know it's 2 taxi fares and a flight. Here we know it's 2 taxi fares and a flight. So we know that's 4 taxi fares, 2 flights. Okay, so we've got that estimated. In the middle, we're there for a week, 21 meals, 7 days accommodation, and whatever else it was, and then some walking around money for a couple of tourist activities. All right. So therefore, our project over our 3 phases is X dollars. All right, and that way we can make a really clear estimation and work that way rather than try and just throw it all into one box. We can actually break it down into steps or break it down into times, whatever it is. But that's going to give you good estimations, which once again will keep the sponsor happy, which keep you as a PM on track. Make sure your team and customers know what to expect, and your customers when to expect it, and your suppliers can make sure they're giving you airfares, they're giving you accommodation, they're giving you meals, all that sort of good stuff. All right, so now we've got a good ballpark estimate. Okay, so the idea is that you know, the closer you are to your project, the more accurate that's going to become. So make sure that you're really up to date with exactly what you're going to be doing and getting involved in it as much as possible. Okay, now the thing about a phase line is that you know, if we're using it this way, if we know what the resources are and we want to start removing things, or as the project sponsor or the project manager, we're saying, hey, look, actually, you know what? These costs are starting to get too high. I'll do this bit and this bit, but you know, we're not going to do this bit anymore. If you do it that way, people know if I take away now, what are the implications and what's that going to mean for me? Okay, so they might decide, look, I don't really want to spend that. Okay. The other thing is you know, if you're not sure what these are, you know, what's a flight to, you know, I'm going to go on this holiday, how much is a flight? You start to use parametric estimating, where you sort of guess based on something else that you know. Look, a holiday, it's probably going to be, I don't know, a flight airfare. I think it's, you know, 1,500 to Europe, so it's probably the same to America. So look, we'll just call the flights 1,500. If it's out, we'll check it. You know, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, well, let's look at something similar we may have done in the past and make an estimate based on that. How much is lunch near where you work? And people will say, well, it's about 10 bucks. Because, you know, you go to this shop and it's that, you go to this shop and it's that, it's this shop, it's that, so it's about 10. Right, so it allows you to estimate based on other things. And once we understand what's going on, then we can make some really good decisions around it, okay? We can then apportion our budget where we divide the budget down into those different steps and making sure that we're only risking certain amounts at certain times. You know, you can go a little bit funky with how you want to do it. As I say, you can set your phases by time or key stages. You know, it's up to you how you want to do it, but this allows you to go to the sponsor and say, okay, sponsor, this is what's happening at that point, this is how much it's going to cost, and this is who's involved. It starts to also give instruction to your team, because this is where we're going to be, this is what we're going to be doing, this is how much it's going to cost us, and allows you to, as the project manager, to start doing your risk assessment, thinking about what can go wrong. So what can go wrong getting myself from my front door to the airport? This can go wrong. Okay, I could forget my passport, I could forget this, I could forget this. Also, how much is that going to cost me? 70 bucks. Okay, I get on the plane, what can go wrong? Well, I leave my baggage in the wrong spot, I do this, I do this, I do this. Okay, and what's the plane fare going to cost me? Is that what I really want to do? By the way, I might go on a cruise instead. After I look at this, I might go, no, let's get on a boat. You know, whatever it happens to be, but if we start to break down time, costs, activities, who's involved, where they're involved, what's the risks, okay? We're starting to see a pretty good plan come out of this. All right, excellent. So that's really getting our scope together. We know what's happening in this activity. We've thought about our stakeholders, we've thought about all the different information needs, how they're going to be affected by our estimates, making sure they're making good estimates and getting good information so this person knows exactly how much they're going to be paying, you know exactly what you're going to be managing, the team knows exactly what they're going to be doing, suppliers know when to give it to you, and the customers are happy and satisfied at the end of the day.